Cool. All right. So welcome to TechEd 2013. Hope you're enjoying it so far and you're not too hungover from last night's party. No? All right. So my name's Guyan Pereira. I'm the CTO of Magnetism Solutions. We specialize in dynamic CRM. I've been working with the product since version 1.2. That was back in 2003, 2004. So I've grown up with the product and seen it evolve over time to what it is now. Today, the presentation was initially going to be all about JavaScript on 2011, but then the NDA on 2013 got released, so I could show you new stuff. So I had to change the presentation, and I'm using all the latest technology like Server 2012, Visual Studio 2013, SQL 2014. So if you see some crashes, I'll be restarting services and whatnot, so hopefully we'll escape without too much damage. So a quick overview of what we'll talk about today. We'll look at TypeScript, what it is and why we should use it. We'll look at the CRM SDK for JavaScript. I'll explain a bit more later on. Then I'll show you how to test, fix, and deploy JavaScript much faster into dynamic CRM. And then I'll show you what's new inside the CRM 2013 SDK in terms of client-side and server-side. So TypeScript, what is it and why we should use it? TypeScript is a new open source programming language created by Microsoft by a guy called Anders who created C# about 10 years ago. The reason that this exists is because Microsoft started writing huge applications using JavaScript and it became unmaintainable. So they decided to improve JavaScript by giving it more tooling and language extensions. So TypeScript, it's not really a new programming language, it's just enhancing JavaScript and making it easier for you to write JavaScript. Couple of main reasons why you should use it. It allows you to maintain your code by giving you classes, interfaces, inheritance, compiler time, checking Visual Studio, IntelliSense, etc. Another reason is it makes it much easier for you to write JavaScript. For example, at the moment, if you wanted to rename a method or a variable, you'd be doing a find and replace, and then you might do that across all the files, and then after you've deployed, you find out, oh crap, I've just renamed the wrong variable. Whereas with TypeScript, you can refactor and rename things without causing too much damage. So all the code I'll be showing you today, it'll be written in TypeScript, so you'll notice that it's slightly different to JavaScript. It's a mix between C# and JavaScript. It won't take you too long to get up to speed with it. About an hour or two just playing around with TypeScript will get you up to speed with it. The next thing we'll look at is the CRM SDK for JavaScript. At the moment, you've all might have come across this. If you've tried to write AJAX calls against the CRM Web Service API, it's a pain. There are libraries out there that help you make it easier, but it's not consistent. For example, if you wanted to make an API call today with .NET, it's much easier. You add a reference to the two SDK DLLs, and away you go. It's consistent. Whereas with JavaScript, you start mixing and matching libraries that other people have written to make it easier. So what we've done is we've come up with a way to have the same experience that you get with .NET in JavaScript, and that's called $XRM. We wanted to call it Microsoft XRM SDK, but because we had to get approval from Microsoft, and it's too cumbersome to type out in JavaScript, so we've just made it $XRM. So let's go through and have a look at why we actually need it. At the moment, like I mentioned before, if you wanted to make an API call with .NET, you use the Microsoft.xrm and Microsoft.crm DLLs. But with JavaScript, you have all these different libraries like XRM SVC Toolkit, Service Toolkit, SDK REST, metadata. You have the SOAP formatter, so different ways of doing the same thing in JavaScript. If you have a team of, let's say, 5 or more developers, one might be familiar with one of these libraries, other might not be. So when you have to pick up their work, you have to learn what they've done. Whereas with .NET, the code is consistent. So let's have a look at the syntax. In C#, if you wanted to create a new record, you get an instance of the organization service, spin up a new entity, set the properties, and call the create method. Using the XRM Service Toolkit, it becomes XRM Service Toolkit SOAP business entity. You set the attributes using the .attributes property bag, then it's SOAP.create. So as you can see already, the syntax is quite different. So if you are a new developer to the team, it's not easy to get your head around this different syntax, and it takes your brain a couple of seconds to switch gears and figure out what it's actually doing. So you want to get rid of all that brain switching and actually work on the business problem that you're trying to solve. So here's another example of the XRM SVC toolkit. You use the create record, and that again has an entirely different syntax altogether, which uses JavaScript object notation. And then the SDK has some examples. If you've copied that, then again, it's completely different. With the new JavaScript SDK, to get an instance of the organization service, you just use $xrm.organization service. And then to create a record, you do $xrm.entity, specify the schema name, and then set the properties just like how you would in C# or VB.NET, and then call the create method. So as you can see, the only difference here is that you have to prefix the classes with $xrm because that's a namespace. Apart from that, you can actually copy-paste C# code onto TypeScript and it'll just work. So the syntax looks very, very similar. So the data types that are available, you have all the data types that you have in .NET and JavaScript. For example, entity reference, which takes in the entity schema name and the ID of the record. In JavaScript, there's no concept of a GUID data type, so it gets passed in as a string. And then we have option set values, which takes in an integer. We have money, decimal. And then any other data type that you want to set on a record, you just have to specify the field schema name and pass it the value. And then internally, the library will figure out how to serialize that data and pass it to the web service. So the API calls that are available, we've made all the methods that are available inside the organization service in JavaScript. So for example, create, which takes in an entity and returns back a ID as a string. And then you have the update method, which takes in an entity. Delete, pretty much the same, takes in the schema name and the ID of the record. Then we have implemented a generic execute method, which takes in a generic request and gives you back a response. So if you notice that some of the messages aren't in this library, you can use the request and response to actually make the call to the web service. You have retrieve, which takes in an entity schema name, ID, and a column set. Just like in .NET, you can pass true to the column set to get all the columns, or you can pass in an array of attributes to get the columns that you just need. We've implemented retrieve multiple as well. We only support fetch XML. Query expressions aren't supported. It was just too cumbersome to do, and fetch XML is a bit nicer. Apart from that, we also have async methods in JavaScript. When you make an AJAX call, the interface gets blocked until that call is complete. We want to make sure that the user gets a good user experience. So we've added async methods for each API method. So for example, create async and update async. The difference being that it takes in a second parameter that's a callback function. So when the create operation is done, it's going to call you back on this function with the ID that CRM just created. We have delete as well, very similar. Execute gives you back a response. And then retrieve multiple. Now, I forgot to put two other methods in there. We've also done associate and disassociate. So now the library is complete. So let's have a look at a demo. So before we get started with that, a couple of things you'll need to download before this starts working is TypeScript. You can get that from typescriptlang.org. Works with Visual Studio 2012 and 2013 as well. Then you need the $xrm library, which you can get from Codeplex, XRM SDK.js. So it's open source. And then another little tool I'll be showing you is the ability to publish web resources from within Visual Studio, and that's done through this CRM 2011 web resource linker. So we won't go into too much detail about TypeScript. I've already created the sample project and got placeholders, and I'll be cheating a little bit by dragging and dropping code from the toolbox. So you'll see that when you create a TypeScript project, the file types are .ts, and when you compile the project, it automatically generates a corresponding JavaScript file called the .js. So in this TypeScript, you'll see that the syntax is slightly different. You've got modules, you've got classes, static methods, constructors, private variables, etc. So what we want to do is display the number of accounts in the system. So at the moment, if you wanted to do that, you could probably make an OData call or use a different library to do it, but I'll be showing you this new XRM library. So first, we have to get an instance of the organization service. To do that, you spin up a new object and then pass it the URL. Don't worry about that get corrected server URL bit. That was to support rollup 8 and prior. But with 2013, you can use XRM page context get client URL, which gives you back the right URL. So once you have that, all you have to do is specify the fetch XML. So if I hit F12 to go to that, at the moment it's returning null, so we want to add some code. So I drag and drop my code. We've defined our fetch XML, and then as you can see, to get the results back, all we're doing is calling retrieve multiple. So rather than writing huge complex SOAP stuff, all you're doing is making a call. And you can see that this SDK already has associate, create, async, delete, and all the available methods that you expect in an iOrganization service. So what I'll do is I'll compile that to make sure there are no errors. And it should alert out how many records that the system has. So what I'll do is I'll publish. Oops. So normally, if you are updating web resources in CRM, you might save in Visual Studio, open up the solution, and then open up the web resource, pick the file, hit save, hit publish, come back to Visual Studio, do a test. So that whole process is taken away by just giving you the ability to right-click and publish. So now if I refresh CRM, I've added a ribbon button or command bar button. And it says it's got 5 records. So it was really simple to make a call to CRM and get the results back. So now let's have a look at updating a record. How easy would that be? So we'll just do the same. We've got a method called update account. Again, nothing inside, so I'll drag my code. So what we're doing here is we're going to set the name of the account to the current name plus the current loop variable. So you'll see that it's got the get attribute value, which is very similar to what you do in C#. So again, what I'm going to do is build the project. You don't actually have to build TypeScript. As soon as you save, it'll automatically compile down to the JavaScript file. But just to make sure, let's do a build. Refresh CRM to make sure we got the latest copy of the JavaScript web resource. So we'll run the demo. It found 5 accounts, and it updated the TechEd 13 account. And if I refresh, you'll see that it's got a 0 at the end. So I'll click on it again just to make sure. So we should get an extra 0 at the end. Yep, it's updating. So now we'll have a look at a complex example where it's going to deactivate and activate the account. So I've already done deactivate. So As you can see, this is a custom message called setStateRequest. We've implemented most of the important messages like assign, create, delete, retrieve, send email, execute workflow, who am I? But if you find that one of the messages that you're wanting is not on the list, feel free to add it to the CodePlex project or just let us know and we'll be happy to add it for you. So activating, again, it's the same. We use the option set to set the state and the status. And it published. So it deactivated it and then reactivated, so we should still see 5 on the list, and we do, and we see 3 zeros at the end of that account because it's the third time that we ran it. So if we have a look again, you'll see that this is very similar to the C# code that you write. Very consistent, so new developers or even existing developers who are familiar with JavaScript, they don't have to get their head around any different syntax for JavaScript. It's always consistent. So let's have a look at what's new in CRM 2013 in terms of the client-side API. I'll be showing you about 4 different things. The first one is add pre-search. What this allows you to do is on lookups, at the moment, if you wanted to filter or apply custom filters, you have to use the add custom view. You have to define the view layout along with the filter. But now with add pre-search, whenever someone clicks on that lookup or starts typing, it allows you to add a filter that gets applied across all the views inside the lookup. So I'll be showing you that in a little bit. And then you have 2 new methods called alert dialog and confirm dialog. What this does is it supports the mobile client. At the moment, JavaScript already has alert and confirm, but these are not supported in the Mocha client with 2013. So you make sure any code that you have that's using alert and confirm, upgrade them to alert dialog and confirm dialog with 2013. And then again, you have 2 new ones called get client and get client state. If you remember in 2011 and CRM 4, you have is Outlook client and is Outlook client offline. Oh, sorry, online. These are replaced by get client and get client state. So the old Outlook methods are deprecated. So let's have a look at that. So I've got a method called demo lookup pre-search. So once you get an instance of the lookup that you want, in this case the primary contact, you can call the add pre-search method, and what it does is it calls you back on this function when CRM is ready. And then to apply the filter, you use the add custom filter option, and that allows you to specify a condition. So you can have linked entities, you can have order by, you can have multiple conditions. When you use this add custom filter, CRM internally automatically groups them all together into an AND operation. So make sure anything that you add using add custom filter gets removed if you don't want it to still exist after another filter. So for example, if you're adding a filter based on a value on the form and you don't want that to happen afterwards, make sure you clear it, because there's no clear operation that does. So in this example, we're going to filter the primary contact lookup and display only the people that have hello in their first name. So I'll save that. And I'll show you the JavaScript that TypeScript generates. If we have a look, you'll see it's got function inside functions to give it namespaces, and the code that you write is pretty similar to what you write if you do it by hand. TypeScript, when you compile under release mode, it'll generate a minified version as well, so you don't have to publish the whole big JavaScript file. Cool, it published. So we'll open up our favorite account and then have a look at the primary contact. So when we click on the primary contact, you'll see that it's only displaying people that have hello in their first name. Oops, editing the wrong one. The next one I'll be showing you is the get client and get client state. So that's all inside the XRM page context variable. We'll just alert out the current client and the state of it. So I've already hooked up the form onload method, so we don't have to do that now. We just have to publish and it'll start working. So I'll refresh this account. We should see the current client. The client can be web, mobile, or Outlook, and the state is online or offline. So it says current client is web, state is online. And the next thing I'll show you is the alert dialog. So let me just take that away for now. So you'll see it's inside the xrm.utility class. And what happens is once the user clicks OK, it calls you back on this function so you can perform another operation. So let's have a look. What we'll do now is once the user clicks OK, we'll ask them to confirm, are you sure you want to close this account record? If they say yes, then there's another function that gets called back. If they say no, then we don't have to do anything. So we'll build that. And then publish. Wait for CRM. So it gave us a confirm dialog. If we say OK, that's a crash, so ignore that one. This is a beta version. So it's a feature, yeah. And it went back to the grid. Yep. Now, as you saw that I was building and right-clicking, publishing, not very ninja-like, right? We want to avoid that. So what I'll show you now is a way that you can speed up development, fixing, and testing much faster. We'll do that by using Fiddler. I don't know if you guys have used Fiddler, but it has a cool feature that allows you to hook into a request and then kind of route it so it can serve content from your local machine. So because the TypeScript compiler automatically compiles down into JavaScript when you save, we can tell Fiddler to grab that JavaScript file and then all we have to do is refresh the form. That way we don't have to publish to CRM. It's all going through your local machine. So it'll cut down on about 10 to 15 seconds. And if you're doing the same thing during an 8-hour workday, you're probably saving about an hour or two of development time. So let's have a look at that. I'll just put an alert 1 and spin up Fiddler. So the way to do this is start up Fiddler, make sure you've got the capture enabled, and then go to the autoresponder tab. And then inside that you can add a rule. So what we have to do is say anytime Fiddler comes across a URL that has this JavaScript, which is normally the web resource name, automatically route it and serve up this file from the local file system. So what I'll do is I'll clear the cache to make sure it's not serving up cached content. And we'll just check the JavaScript to make sure it's got the alert 1. It doesn't. Cool, so now it's got the alert 1. I haven't published the CRM at all. When I open up this account, I should see alert 1. And there you go. So now you've bypassed that whole publishing process. And when you're ready to publish, you can just right-click and publish. One last new API change that's available in CRM 2013 is this get query string parameters option. Currently, if you wanted to get the URL, you have to use window.location.href and you have to pass the query string yourself. But with 2013, you've got this new method called get query string parameters, which returns you a dictionary key and an object value pair. Cool. So now let's look at some of the new server-side things that are available with CRM 2013. One of the cool features that's available is the real-time workflow or synchronous workflows. Currently, if you wanted to run a workflow synchronously, you couldn't do it. It's always executed afterwards. And for example, let's say you wanted to concatenate two fields and put it into another field. You most likely ended up writing a plugin to do it if you wanted the user to see it straight away because the workflow ran afterwards. But in 2013, you have the option of saying that this workflow runs within the same transaction as the main operation. So for example, if you're doing things like naming plugins or calculations, you can do that from a real-time workflow. So I'll show you how you can do that. You need to go into settings under processes just like before, and when you go to create the workflow, it asks you whether you want to run this workflow in the background or in real time. So let's just have a look. I'll say populate fax number. Category, it's still the same workflow, but you'll notice that it gave us an option to say run this workflow in the background. So all you have to do is uncheck this option and it becomes a real-time workflow. We pick the entity just like before, which is an account. Click OK, then everything else is the same. But there are a couple of new tick boxes and options that I'll show you. So the new tick box that you have is keep logs. So at the moment when a workflow runs, even if it's successful or errored, it keeps a log entry which uses up data, especially in the online space. It doesn't clear that up unless you have a bulk delete job that cleans it up frequently. So you can tell the system to automatically clean up these workflow jobs if they're successful. If they fail, then they can stay in the system. Scope, again, it's the same as before, but then you have these different options to start when. When the record is created, real-time workflows can only run after, not before. But things like status change, you can run it before or after. So we'll just run it on create for now. And then you have this other option called execute as, meaning that you can tell the system to run this workflow under the current owner or current person that's running the operation or the person that owns this workflow. And you'll also notice a button called convert to a background workflow. So any background workflows that you have, you can convert them to real time by clicking on this button. So you can switch between the two at any time. So we'll just add a new step and let's say update the fax number. Normally this is where SQL goes nuts and I have to restart SQL, so hopefully it doesn't do it. So we'll just set it to the account name. And we'll activate. Now to activate real-time workflows, you need a special privilege called Activate Real-Time Processes. So if you are an administrator or you create admin roles for power users, make sure you give that privilege, otherwise they won't be able to activate these processes. Now if we go back into our accounts, here's our ribbon. So we'll create a new account, and we should see, we should see the fax number being populated straight away. Test. I'll click save. And there you go, the fax number automatically got populated. Whereas before, it wouldn't have happened. You would have had to close the record and open it. And then even then, it wouldn't have populated until the server executed the workflow. Cool. Couple of other things that are new with 2013. They are custom actions and entity images. I'll show you one more thing as well called phone number formatting. So the phone number formatting option, it's not a fully fledged phone number formatting, like it doesn't put brackets or spaces or dashes into a phone number. It allows you to prefix the country code with a number in the system. And it also allows you to create new fields and then say that this field is of type phone number, like what you do when you create a URL field. You know how it puts a hyperlink in? So now the system allows you to say it's a phone number, and it makes it clickable. So when you click on it, it'll dial via Skype or link based on the system setting. So I'll show you that. Entity images. In CRM 4 and 2011, you had a bunch of icon sets. And regardless of the record that you opened, you always saw the same icon. But in 2013, you have a new attribute on each entity called entity image, and you can set an image onto that attribute. And then when you open up the record, you get to see that image. So it's quite useful for things like contact faces, account logos, product images, etc. And then custom actions. This is pretty cool. This allows you to extend the platform, the API itself. So if you think of this as, let's take an example, a help desk scenario, where you have an escalate operation or escalate business process. Inside that business process, you might create 10 different records, update a bunch, and then assign it to someone, send an email. So all those operations become part of the escalate business process. What the custom action allows you to do is design that business process inside the workflow designer, but allows you to execute it through the SDK. So now CRM becomes your platform. You don't have to write APIs on top of it. You just use the designer to design it and then execute it through the SDK. So let's have a look at all three of those options. I'll show you the phone number formatting option first. That's under administration. System settings, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see it's got the ability to prefix any phone number in the system with that, so we can say it's +64. And then it also gives you the ability to dial out. So when you click on a field, you can say, most of my users are using Skype, so let's use Skype. If you're using link, you can dial via link. And now once you go into, let's say, the customizations area and create a new field, it allows you to define the phone number format option. So I'll show you that. So whenever you create a new text field, this format, it gives you the option to say it's a phone number. And let's take a look at our example account that's got a phone number. See how it becomes clickable, underlined? If I click on it, it starts using Skype. And it's prefixed it with a 1. I don't think I refreshed the record because I changed it to +64. There you go. So it's +64. And it starts using link instead, which is the TEL option. Now I'll show you the entity image option. That's going to be annoying. So we've got an account at the moment, and it's got this placeholder image. What we want to do is replace that image with something else. So to do that, I've got a bit of helper code there, but the way to do it is you update the image the same way that you update any other attribute in the record. So what you do is create a new entity, specify the current record ID, and then the field that you need to set is entity image. And what you do is you set that to the byte array of the file. So to do that, you say read all bytes, get the file. I've got 2 different files, and then you call the update method. So we'll run that. I'll use the first image, and it said updated. So we'll refresh the screen and see what it updated it to. That's a lazy developer right there. So we'll change it to someone else. So it's quite easy to change. The last one I'll be showing you is a custom action. So to create a custom action, you go to the process area, and you create it just like a workflow, but then you specify that it's a process. So let's have a look. So it's a custom action, the category, and we'll say example. Entity, you don't have to specify an entity for this. It could be a global action. But if you don't specify an entity, you don't get some of the steps like update record, because that's based on the entity that you pick here. So for now, we'll just pick account. Notice how it gives you a unique name, and the unique name is how you refer back to this custom action inside the SDK. Again, you have the option of keeping the error logs, and then you have the ability to specify input and output parameters. So what we can say is input 1, and then you can specify the data type. So all the data types that you are used to with the .NET SDK, they're available here. And then you can say whether that input is required or not, the direction, which is either you're going to be sending stuff into it or getting stuff out of it. And then you design the custom action the same way that you do a workflow, a real-time workflow, and a process. Still thinking. So there you go, you've got all the different options. And if you have any custom actions, custom workflow activities, they would show up here as well. So now the whole system is like a big jigsaw puzzle that you can put things together in using the designer. So I've created one already just to save a bit of time. It's got 2 parameters, param1, which takes in a phone number, and then a parameter that's coming out, which is going to output the current account name. So if we go back to our SDK, so the way to execute this custom action is to create a new organization request. The request name becomes the schema name that you got when you created the custom action. Then you specify all your parameters using the .parameters property bag. You need to specify a target because this custom action has to run on a certain record. To specify what record it is, it needs to be set as a target. So we're saying it's an account with the test account ID. Param1 becomes the phone number, so I'll say it's TechEd 2013. And then we execute that request, and then we get a response back. Inside the response, there's a collection of results. Because we specified out1 as our output parameter name, we can get that back. So I'll run this. So it's saying that another account got updated. If we go back into our accounts area, you'll see that it got updated to TechEd 2013 instead of 123123. Now, a couple of different things. This is the hard way to execute a custom action. The easier way to execute it is to use the CRM SVC util to generate the early bound classes. That way you get strongly typed access to this custom action. So you can say new auto-populate phone number request XYZ equals blah, set param1, execute, and then get the output parameter. But this is the hard way of doing it. So we've seen a new SDK for JavaScript, which makes it easier and more consistent and more manageable to execute AJAX requests against the SDK. And then we've seen how to improve your test, fix, deploy time through the web resource linker, and also using Fiddler to trick it to grab the resource from the local file system. Then we saw a couple of different things that are new with the client-side SDK for 2013. And then we saw custom actions, real-time workflows, entity images, and phone number formatting options. There are heaps of other things that are new with 2013. Unfortunately, don't have the time to show you all of it. Keep an eye out for blogs. There's a lot of people blogging about 2013. So yeah, hopefully that will help you. So any questions? Yep.
What do you recommend as the best way of debugging JavaScript?
Best way to debug JavaScript? Yep. So you can do it a couple of ways. You can use the IE dev tool. So if it's already published, you can put a breakpoint and do it. But then if you're using Fiddler, when you reroute the file to the local file system, you can use a Visual Studio debugger to debug into it. Yeah? Yep.
How are the entity images stored inside CRM? Are they stored as image?
No, it's not. It's a var binary. Yep.
It's still in the database.
Yep. It's still in the database. Yep.
When you create synchronous workflows,
Yep.
on which server will they?
It runs under the sandbox service. Yep. So it's not the async service. It's the actual web server that's executing it.
Are there any anticipated performance improvements from like finding indexing and generally
Yep.
SDK requests as a result of moving
Yep.
the database schema from two entities to one?
Yep. So yeah, like you mentioned, now there are no extension-based tables. So there's a single table for each entity, and that when I talked to the Microsoft guys, they said it gave a 30% improvement in performance.
Does that mean that access to the underlying CRM tables is now not as unsupported as it was previously?
Use,
So accessing the filtered view is still the only
Yeah.
supported way to get
yeah, you still have to go through filtered views. Yeah. Do you want green or red? No. Any other questions? No. Cool. So if you want to get in touch with me later on, you can contact me at nzxrmguy on Twitter, or feel free to email me anytime at guyan@magnetismsolutions.com. All the links to TypeScript, Web Resource Linker, and XRM SDK.js on the PowerPoint. I'll be happy to send you through all the sample code that I've shown you today. Just flick me an email. Evaluations, it's very important that you submit an eval for this session so Microsoft and myself can improve and deliver better presentations next year. And if you fill out good evals, like 9 out of 9s, 10 out of 10s, I've still got 3 bags of lollies, and you might just win some of these prizes. So thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation.